It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon on November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. The kind of day when most Americans were preparing for dinner with family or a long weekend of rest. But somewhere in Portland, Oregon, a man dressed in a dark business suit, white shirt, black tie, and sunglasses was preparing for something entirely different, something that would baffle authorities for decades. He walked into the Portland International Airport, carrying nothing but a black attaché case and a paper ticket purchased for $20 in cash. His destination was Seattle, Washington, a short 30-minute flight north. On the boarding pass, the name simply read, Dan Cooper. At the time, there was nothing remarkable about him. Medium height, slim build, olive-toned skin, quiet and polite. He looked like any other businessman traveling for the holiday weekend, but within an hour, he would hijack the plane, demand a ransom, and vanish into thin air, never to be seen again. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. A mystery that remains open to this day, spawning countless theories, documentaries, FBI investigations, and internet sleuth obsessions. Who was he? Where did he go? And most importantly, did he survive? The hijacking of Northwest Orient Flight 305 became the stuff of legend. Not because it was violent or deadly, but because it was so calculated, so calm, and so perfectly executed. This wasn't the first airplane hijacking in the United States. The late 1960s and early 70s saw a rise in skyjackings, most often politically motivated or attempts to escape to Cuba. But D.B. Cooper's case was different. It was clean, cold, professional. There were no hostages harmed, no chaos on board, and no apparent political agenda. Just a man with a plan. And a parachute. Even stranger was what came after. Nothing. Despite an extensive FBI investigation, millions of dollars spent on the search, and thousands of tips over the years, no conclusive trace of Cooper was ever found. No body, no confirmed identity. Just a bag of cash found nearly a decade later along a riverbank. And even that raised more questions than answers. Over the years, the mystery of D.B. Cooper has become a cultural phenomenon, referenced in TV shows like Prison Break, Breaking Bad, and Loki, the subject of Netflix documentaries, and the inspiration for books, songs, and conspiracy theories. What drives the fascination is not just the crime itself, but how cleanly it was executed. A man in a suit calmly hijacks a plane, receives a $200,000 ransom, and disappears into the cold, rainy wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. No one screamed. No one died. And almost no evidence was left behind. Was he a former military man? A professional parachutist? An airline insider? Or just a clever nobody who pulled off the perfect crime? And how did he vanish without a trace in the age before security cameras, biometric ID, or even strict airport checks? What you're about to hear is not just a recounting of the event, but a journey through every known fact, every major suspect, every theory, and every strange twist that continues to puzzle investigators over 50 years later. At 4:35 p.m. on November 24th, 1971, a man in his mid-40s approached the counter of Northwest Orient Airlines at Portland International Airport. He paid $20 in cash, no ID required, for a one-way ticket to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport on Flight 305, set to depart just 15 minutes later. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. The airline ticketing agent didn't think twice. Cooper was polite, well-dressed, and calm. He wore a dark overcoat, a neatly pressed black suit, a white shirt, and a black necktie. He carried with him a small black briefcase and a brown paper bag. He looked, to all appearances, like a typical businessman traveling light for the holidays. He boarded the plane without incident and took seat 18C, an aisle seat in the rear third of the aircraft. The plane was a Boeing 727-100, a narrow-body, three-engine jetliner known for its unique rear air stairs, a feature that would later become important. Flight 305 wasn't full. There were only 36 passengers aboard, along with 6 crew members. The flight attendants noted nothing unusual at first. Cooper ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, common practice back then, and waited for the plane to taxi. His behavior was quiet, even relaxed. After takeoff, Cooper leaned forward and handed a note to Florence Schaffner, a flight attendant. At first, she didn't read it. She assumed it was just another businessman slipping her a phone number. Cooper leaned toward her and said quietly, "Miss, you'd better read that. I have a bomb." Florence Schaffner opened the note. It was written in neat, all-capital letters on a small slip of paper. It read, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit next to me." Startled but composed, she did as he asked. Cooper opened his briefcase just slightly, enough to reveal red sticks wrapped in wires and a battery. It looked convincing, whether it was real or not. He then dictated his demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, a fuel truck standing by in Seattle for a refueling stop, and a guarantee that no funny business would be attempted. Schaffner relayed the demands to the cockpit. The pilot, William Scott, contacted air traffic control, who informed the FBI and local police. Authorities on the ground quickly began gathering the ransom money and arranging for parachutes, while keeping passengers unaware of what was happening. Meanwhile, Cooper remained calm. He smoked another cigarette, ordered another bourbon, and chatted politely with the crew. One flight attendant later described him as calm, considerate, and never nervous. The flight circled above Puget Sound for nearly 2 hours, while the authorities scrambled to meet Cooper's demands. Passengers were told there was a mechanical issue. No one suspected anything serious. In fact, most were relaxed, reading magazines or chatting quietly, unaware they were in the middle of one of the greatest unsolved crimes in history. At 5:39 p.m., nearly 2 hours after takeoff, Flight 305 finally received clearance to land in Seattle. By that time, the ransom money had been gathered from local banks, all in used $20 bills, and parachutes had been sourced from a nearby skydiving school and Air Force base. As the plane descended, Cooper gave a final set of instructions: no police near the aircraft. The ransom and parachutes were to be delivered by a single airline employee. The plane was to be refueled quickly and prepared for a second takeoff. The landing was smooth. Passengers still had no idea what had taken place. They were told to remain seated as a small delay was handled. Outside, FBI agents watched from a distance. No one dared approach the aircraft too closely. Soon, the money and parachutes were delivered. Cooper kept his word. He let the 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants leave the aircraft unharmed. Only Cooper, the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 remaining flight attendant stayed on board. What would follow next would cement the legend of D.B. Cooper forever. As Flight 305 landed in Seattle, the situation was tense, but eerily controlled. D.B. Cooper had made his intentions clear, and everyone, from the flight crew to the FBI agents on the ground, followed his instructions to the letter. His demands had been met. The $200,000 in cash had been collected, and 4 parachutes had been sourced. On the tarmac, the aircraft taxied to a remote section of the airport. The passengers remained unaware of what had happened until after they disembarked. None had seen a weapon. No one had been harmed. They left calmly, some even thanking the crew. Inside, Cooper kept just the essentials: the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, who would later become the primary witness in the case. Cooper now took time to inspect the parachutes. He rejected one due to being sewn shut and selected 2, 1 main and 1 reserve. Authorities would later discover that one of the reserve parachutes was a dummy, used only for training. Whether Cooper knew this or not remains unclear. He allowed Tina to sit nearby and occasionally engaged her in small talk. He asked about the city below, the weather, and the crew. She described him as polite and strangely considerate. He even offered to request meals for the crew before takeoff. The ransom money arrived in a canvas bank bag. The $200,000, all in $20 bills, had been hastily gathered from local banks, mostly old notes with unmarked serial numbers. Cooper examined the money and seemed satisfied. He then outlined his new flight plan. The aircraft was to head south toward Mexico City, but with very specific flight conditions. The plane must fly no higher than 10,000 feet. Speed must not exceed 200 knots. The landing gear must remain down. The rear air stair must remain lowered. The crew protested. Flying with the air stair down was not normal procedure, but Cooper was confident. He said it had been done before. He was right. The Boeing 727 was one of the few commercial jets capable of deploying its rear air stair mid-flight. He also requested a second fuel stop in Reno, Nevada, likely a backup plan in case Mexico proved unreachable. By 7:40 p.m., the aircraft was refueled and ready. Cooper was about to vanish into legend. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 lifted off again, this time with only 5 souls on board and a mystery unfolding in real time. The pilots followed Cooper's instructions, heading south at low altitude and speed with the cabin depressurized and the rear air stair slightly lowered. It was dark outside. Rain tapped steadily on the fuselage. The cabin was quiet. No passengers, no chaos. Just the hum of the engines and the weight of the unknown. Cooper remained calm and composed. He wore a parachute and carried 2 of the others with him. He tied the ransom bag securely and asked the flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, to move to the cockpit and remain there with the crew. At 8 p.m., a warning light in the cockpit indicated the air stair had been fully deployed. The crew asked over the intercom if Cooper needed help. He replied in a flat voice, "No." That was the last anyone heard from him. Around 8:13 p.m., the flight crew felt a slight upward movement in the tail, a shift in cabin pressure. They assumed Cooper had jumped. They landed in Reno, Nevada, as planned. Law enforcement swarmed the aircraft, but Cooper was gone. No parachute, no briefcase, no money, nothing. The FBI launched an immediate and extensive search operation. They dubbed the case Norjack, Northwest Hijacking. They interviewed passengers, flight crew, and airport personnel. A sketch artist produced a composite drawing. Sunglasses, black suit, generic features. Nothing stood out. They traced the flight path and narrowed the probable jump zone to a heavily wooded area near Ariel, Washington, along the Lewis River. But the terrain was rugged, thick forests, mountainous areas, and cold November rain. Ground teams searched for weeks. Planes flew over the suspected drop zone. Parachutists were consulted. Locals were interviewed. Nothing. Not a trace of Cooper, or the parachutes, or the money was ever found. One of the FBI's main hopes was that Cooper would spend the money. They recorded all 10,000 serial numbers of the $20 bills and distributed lists to banks, casinos, and law enforcement nationwide. The bills were never used. For years, no money matching the serials turned up. Until 1980. A boy named Brian Ingram, digging in the sand along the Columbia River, found several bundles of decaying cash totaling $5,800. The serial numbers matched the ransom. But the location, Tina Bar, over 20 miles from the estimated drop zone, raised new questions. How did the money get there? Why was it still bundled? No other bills were found. The rest of the ransom remains missing to this day. The FBI investigated over 800 suspects in the years following the hijacking. Most were ruled out, but a few stood out. Dwayne Weber, a career criminal who, on his deathbed, allegedly told his wife, "I'm Dan Cooper." Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper and flight attendant with Northwest Airlines. He resembled Cooper and had suspicious financial behavior post-1971. Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. hijacked a plane in 1972 with a similar method, but was quickly arrested. However, McCoy didn't match Cooper's description. None of these suspects could be definitively tied to the case. Each had pieces of the puzzle, but never the full picture. In later years, one name gained traction: Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam veteran, explosives expert, and alleged con man. Journalists and amateur sleuths pointed to his military background, skydiving skills, and cryptic comments. Some even claimed he was trying to brag without confessing. A 2016 documentary claimed to decode a series of letters attributed to Cooper, suggesting Rackstraw's name was hidden within. But the FBI never charged him, and Rackstraw denied involvement until his death in 2019. Other suspects surfaced: a Boeing employee, a Canadian outdoorsman, a man obsessed with flight manuals. None panned out. The mystery only deepened. Over the decades, theories multiplied. He died in the fall. The terrain, weather, and jump conditions were brutal. He survived and disappeared. Cooper was a professional, perhaps ex-military or CIA. He was an insider. Familiarity with the Boeing 727's rear stair and flight limitations suggest aviation knowledge. He was Canadian. Dan Cooper was the name of a Belgian-Canadian comic book hero, a pilot who wore a parachute and performed daring missions. Then there were wilder claims: that he used the hijacking as a smokescreen to expose government corruption, that he landed, buried the money, and vanished into the woods, that he escaped to South America and lived anonymously. The truth remains elusive. Despite being a federal crime, the Cooper case became something else: a legend. He inspired books, films, and TV series, conspiracy theories, fan clubs and websites, Even an annual festival in Ariel, Washington, D.B. Cooper became a symbol of mystery and rebellion. A modern-day outlaw who hurt no one, outsmarted the system, and vanished. His story tapped into the American imagination, a figure outside the law, but not villainous, just gone. In July 2016, the FBI officially closed the case, citing a lack of new leads. But amateur investigators continue the hunt. YouTube videos, Reddit threads, podcasts, and even private investigations carry the flame. Every few years, a new clue surfaces. A confession, a buried object, a tantalizing detail in an old report. But nothing definitive. To this day, no one knows for certain who D.B. Cooper was, what happened to him, or where the rest of the money is. One man, one act. 50 years of silence, and a mystery that still haunts the sky.